Part of what we're looking at as Trump's strength, his resilience, is really a reflection of Biden's fragility. Republicans are not afraid of Joe Biden. They're not afraid. They don't think that by putting up somebody this damaged, frankly, this deranged, with this many deficits, is going to hurt them at all. Because the polls show over and over again that even with 978 felonies, he's still neck and neck with Biden. And so it's a worrying sign. You're correct. There's some worrying signs for Trump. There should be worrying signs for Democrats.
Well, that's Van Jones talking about some of the legal peril that Donald Trump has found himself in. That's a lot of felonies that he just listed there. And it's among all of the things that are taking place throughout this campaign. We know there's this parallel story that is incredibly indicative of the support that Donald Trump has continued to amass throughout his legal challenges. I don't know that anyone could have predicted it, but it's hard to argue with the idea that he hasn't gotten more support because of his legal trouble. How bad could the legal trouble get? Well, we speak to the experts on that because I do not play a lawyer on the radio at all. So we speak with Andy McCarthy. He's a contributing editor at National Review, a fellow at the National Review Institute, and a Fox News contributor. Andy, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Annie, great to be with you.
I wanted to ask you first and foremost a very simple question, because we've seen Donald Trump win 2 competitions here in Iowa now and in New Hampshire. Are any of the legal troubles that Donald Trump is currently facing going to disallow him or remove him from being able to win the presidency in November?
I don't think there'll be legal impediments to that. I mean, if he were convicted of a crime, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that somebody who is convicted, let alone indicted for a crime, is ineligible to be president. The only technically viable way that he could be denied the presidency for a legal reason would be if the Supreme Court were to swallow this Section 3 of the 14th Amendment argument that he is disqualified as an insurrectionist. I actually don't think that's going to succeed. So that's, if they surprise me and they surprise a lot of other people and accept that argument, then yes, he could be removed from the ballot, and that would make it, mathematically impossible if he gets removed from enough places, make it mathematically impossible to win. But I don't expect that to happen.
So it's a Supreme Court ruling on his eligibility to appear on the ballot, not anything that he could be charged for. He could be convicted. He could be in jail. As long as his name can appear on the ballot, according to the Supreme Court, he can still win the presidency.
Historically, Annie, my recollection is that Eugene Debs, around the time of the First World War, ran for president from prison. There just isn't any. What the Constitution says is that you have to be over 35, a natural-born citizen, and resident in the United States for 14 years. Other than that, there's no restrictions.
Well, I just want to make that clear. I've asked you that question before, and as we continue to get closer to November, I know a lot of people are worried that he would be removed from the race, and it just doesn't seem, barring that Supreme Court decision, that would be the case. I want to ask you about the Supreme Court ruling there in Texas with the razor wire that has been put up. Texas and the federal government going back and forth on protecting our southern border. This ruling comes out, and we saw some more conservative justices say, no, this is the responsibility of the federal government, and Texas is out of line to put this down. What can you tell us about the implications of this ruling that was very narrow in that 5-4 decision?
Yeah, I think people are reading too much into it because it's really not much of a ruling. The court has not reached the merits of this dispute between the Biden administration and the state of Texas. And it is a profound constitutional dispute because it goes to a core tenet of the American federalist system that the states are sovereign. So the court basically, I guess I should back up and say there is a litigation that's going on in the lower courts. And in order to freeze the situation while the lower courts considered the case, the district court and the Fifth Circuit Appeals Court put an order in place that said the federal government can't touch the razor wire which it was basically dismantling on the premise or the ostensibly saying that it was preventing the Homeland Security personnel, the Border Patrol, from being able to carry out their federal mission. I think, sensibly to most people, the Biden administration is going to bat for the illegal aliens against the people of Texas. That's the way I see it. But the lower courts didn't rule on the merits of the case. They just said that the federal government has to leave things be until the courts do rule. All the Supreme Court did was say, we're not going to interfere with the federal government at this point. And they noted that the Texas case in the Fifth Circuit is proceeding on an expedited basis. So there's going to be a decision of that case in the Fifth Circuit, and then it'll come back to the Supreme Court and they'll rule on the merits. I'm disappointed, like many other people are, that the court intruded on the status quo and allowed the federal government to dismantle the razor wire. But they haven't ruled on the merits yet, and it's not clear that just because the case came out 5-4 on whether they should disturb that order, that doesn't mean the court is going to rule in Biden's favor rather than Texas's in the end.
That's an important distinction. Andy McCarthy with us right now, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Fox News contributor, and contributing editor at National Review. There's story after story, just scrolling through Fox News here, any news outlet, more than 96,000 known gotaways at southern border since October 1st. I mean, we have a real crisis on our hands right now. And we've heard the president say upon returning from his winter break that he needs Congress to act and give him the money to protect the southern border. Texas is trying to do what they can do to protect their very real southern border of their state. Where is the responsibility legally of the sovereignty of that border that just seems to be a blind eye put on it by the federal government? Where does the legal ultimate responsibility lie to protect it?
Yeah, this is a very dicey area of the law because things have kind of flipped over the history of the United States. When the Constitution was ratified, it was much more clear that the states who remain sovereign, this is the unique development of American constitutional governance, is that it's a co-sovereignty system. Both the federal government and the states maintain sovereignty and are supreme in their own areas. And when the Constitution was ratified, what was clear was that the states had the power to keep intruders out of their territory. What was possibly in doubt was the extent of the federal government's power. The court has derived a border security power on the part of the federal government out of the fact that the federal government is sovereign and therefore has a duty to control the borders of the United States. But I think, Annie, that was meant to vindicate the state's interest in security against invading foreigners, not to nullify the state's ability to defend themselves. So the real question, to put a fine point on what you're asking, is, are the states still sovereign? Is that basic assumption of the American constitutional framework still true? And that is something that unfortunately is in doubt. I don't know how the court's going to come out on that.
So when you see the pushing of states like Texas taking the measures that they're taking to try to protect their border, do they need to stretch their limits as much as they can so that they can reach those challenges, so we can get a determination on where that line lies?
Yeah, I think what could very simply, not that they'll do this, but the very simple thing that needs to be rejected here is an innovation in policy that the Obama administration pushed and that the Biden administration has continued to push. And that is when the courts developed this idea that the federal government now has primacy in terms of border security and immigration, the reason that system worked was because the states had the authority to enforce federal law, as long as they didn't do anything that was inconsistent with what federal statutory law was enacted by Congress. What Obama said was that the states were limited not just by federal law, but by federal policy. In other words, the incumbent administration's views on how the laws would be enforced. And what that means is that if you have an administration like the Obama administration or like the Biden administration that won't enforce the laws, the states are stuck. They can no longer say all we're doing is enforcing Congress's laws, like the law of Congress that says if you are an illegal immigrant, you're supposed to be detained until the end of your expulsion proceedings. What the Obama administration is saying is if we, the incumbent administration, decide that we're not going to enforce the laws, the state can't enforce them either. And I think if the court would simply say the states have full authority to enforce federal immigration law, irrespective of what an incumbent administration's policy is, we'd be in a lot better place than we are now.
It's an interesting exercise in federalism, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But the time is ticking. That's the border problem that we're facing right now as a country. But before I let you go, we're speaking with Andy McCarthy right now, Fox News contributor and contributing editor at National Review. I want to ask about the immigration side of it because they're two distinct concerns that the country has to face right now. We've heard a lot of the political candidates say instead of catch and release, we want to catch and deport. We've talked about, the actuality of being able to round people up who have come here and deporting all of them. As the law stands right now, what does the federal government, what kind of latitude do they have to catch these individuals and just directly deport them back to the country that they came from?
Yeah, they have full authority to do that. I think what's illegal is this scam program that Biden set up, where he has this kind of what they call a parole, where they, instead of having the illegal immigrants cross the border at the ports of entry, where their theory is, the government's theory is that if they step one foot on the United States, we have to let them in because they're entitled to claim asylum and have all kinds of legal proceedings. What Biden did was to try to mask that we were letting so many illegal aliens in, is have them apply for a date and time to come in as if that made it legal when he doesn't have any authority to do that. And now he considers these people who are in to be paroled in. And in point of fact, they're actually illegally in the country. There's no reason a new administration couldn't switch policy and deport them. But what you're left with, of course, is the finite nature of our resources, right? I mean, there are enough illegal aliens that have come in just under Biden's time in office to be bigger than the city of Los Angeles, which is the second largest city in the United States. We're talking about millions of people. And what typically happens is, a new government comes in and says, well, we'll go after the low-hanging fruit. Like if we have people who are illegally in the country and we know they're criminals, we'll make an effort to get them and deport them. But they just don't have the resources to, we're talking about a population of perhaps 30 million people in the United States who shouldn't be here.
Right.
And they're not going to be able to deport 30 million people.
It's outrageous. And the longer we wait to resolve the issue, the more difficult it's going to be to resolve the issue. But it is a very important one. Andy McCarthy, thank you for the time today. I know that there's a ton of legal issues out there to discuss, and I think that this immigration one and the border one is often overlooked for the more salacious election and Trump and Biden and Hunter. So we appreciate you giving us some of your insight on this issue today.
Thanks so much, Annie.
Of course. We hope to do it again soon. Thank you. Andy McCarthy, the contributing editor at National Review, fellow at National Review Institute, and Fox News contributor. He's also a former chief assistant U.S. attorney. Great to have him on the show and give us that intellect.